think we're fairly static on numbers now. So if I start with the introduction, and then if we've got any late joiners, they won't be missing too much for the first couple of minutes at least. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's session, and thank you for joining us. So today's session is one of 3 webinars that are being co-hosted by the Surrey Junior Lawyers Division and the Surrey Law Society, and the sessions are free to our members. This year's Supporting Surrey programme focuses on mental well-being, and there's a couple of other sessions coming up later this year, and the details of those are on the screen now, so please do take a note and sign up if you're interested in those. Just also worth noting, Surrey Law Society has also a full programme of other webinars and more specialised and intensive training sessions that are available. So please do check those out online at surreylawsociety.org.uk if that's something that's of interest. Just a couple of housekeeping points before we get going. There will be an opportunity to raise questions of our speaker today. So if you want to raise a question during the webinar, please use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screens. We'll also open up to a Q&A at the end of the session as well. So if you want to save your question to personally ask it at the end, then you're more than welcome to do that. And you'll just need to use the raise your hand function. And then we can facilitate that. And a final note as well, that the webinar is being recorded and it will be made available to made available to members after the event. So just to be aware of that. So turning to today's session, we're delighted to be joined by Anthony Taylor from 359, who's going to be talking to us about our time management skills and helping us to be able to leave the office on time, which I'm sure we can all agree is something that we all strive towards. And if we can get it right, it will transform our work-life balance. Anthony is going to be taking us through 6 strategies to help try out a new mindset to structure our day more productively, and looking at how to work with our brains rather than fighting against it. Anthony runs 359, which is a mental skills consultancy that specialises in equipping people and teams with the mental skills needed to thrive in today's world. They focus on developing personal and leadership performance through mental fitness. Anthony brings the experience of a 20-year career across the private and public sector, both nationally and internationally, having held several head of communications positions and ran a successful publishing company in the Caribbean. So over the last 5 years, Anthony's worked with clients across numerous sectors, including KPMG, AO, the Royal Navy, Goldman Sachs, and the Crown Prosecution Service, to name a few. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Anthony to take us through today's session.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kate. Thank you for having me on today. Welcome, everybody. As Kate said, my name is Anthony Taylor. I'm going to be taking you through this session as we go through it. What I'd like to start off with is a question for you. What difference would leaving the office on time every night, or almost every night, make for you? If you've got any thoughts around that, feel free to put them in the chat box. That'd be great to see. What difference would that make to you if you could leave the office on time on a more consistent basis? I'm guessing that for many of you, it might actually transform some aspects of your lives. Maybe you'd start to go to the gym a bit more. Maybe you'd be able to go for an evening walk with the dog. Maybe you'd be able to spend a bit more time with the children, and that would be really important to you. So it's about thinking about how the importance of leaving the office on time can do for us is really the first step in starting to be able to do something about it. I used to really struggle with that, and it wasn't until I actually had to leave the office on time, and there were no ifs and buts about that, that I was able to really start to do that. And for me, my why, if you like, was these two. The prospect of leaving 2 primary or nursery age children on the doorstep of their nursery at 6 o'clock at night. And the idea just quite frankly filled me with dread if I wasn't able to be there on time, because at the time I found myself about 10 years ago, a single dad to these 2 small children with a job that was 30 miles away down the M6. And anyone who knows the M6 knows what a nightmare that can be. on a regular basis. And although my children absolutely adored their nursery and where they were, 10-hour days, even in an environment that is as supportive as that, is just too long. What my children really needed was me there, time with me. And no matter how successful I was or how much money I earned, I couldn't buy back that time. So it was very apparent that actually what I needed to do was either start to work less or be more efficient, or both. So it was really important that I started to do that. And as Nietzsche said, a man who has a why can put up with almost any how. So it's really important that we take time to find that. Will and Merriam were sadly the byproduct of the collateral damage of a broken relationship. There was nothing to do with them. And it was really important that I get to be there. And what I realized was being able to pick them up on time every single night, or if not, actually slightly earlier, was massively important. Just that hug, the warmth of their embrace, the excitement in their eyes as they chose to share with me about what had gone on with their day, that was actually absolutely priceless. And no boss and no client and no crisis was just worth me not being able to make sure that I could be there for them and spend that valuable time with them. So really thinking about that why is absolutely important, and identifying that. So I want you to think about, what's your why for the minute? And if you've got any ideas or any thoughts, feel free to put them in the chat box right now. It'd be great to make this session a little bit more interactive than me just monologuing for the next however long. So if you've got some thoughts, please put them in there. If anyone wants to raise their hand and contribute and unmute themselves, let me know. Just raise your hand and we can do that. Anyone willing to share their why? What would be the difference for you? What's your why? Better mental health? Absolutely. Thank you, Lucy. Yeah, we've seen a lot of people struggling with poor mental health as a result of spending long hours, especially online, away from people. Any other thoughts? Why is it really important to you? More time for hobbies, spending time with friends and family. Thank you, Sunay. Anybody else? Spending time with your partner and family, same as the above. Yeah, thanks for Bethany. Yeah, so absolutely, you can see that there are lots of really powerful reasons to make sure that we can start to leave the office on time. Getting clear around that can be important. So one of the ways to do that is to ask yourself that why question 5 times. So if I take, Bethany's example or Emma's example about getting home for the kids, asking yourself, okay, well, why is that important to you? And then whatever your answer is, then ask yourself, well, why is that important to you? And if you start to do that 4 or 5 times, it helps you really drill down into what's really important. So those are surface level answers. So but really think about how motivating out of 10 does that spending time with your family really mean to you? But if you can ask yourself that why question 5 levels deeper, then you can start to really uncover what's truly motivating to you. So spending a little bit of time, 5 or 10 minutes, asking yourself, why is spending time with my partner and family more important to me? And then whatever that answer is, why is that spending time important to me? And then why is that? Do that 5 times can make a massive difference in uncovering that why. And that's really the first step. What I realized though, having done this for a while, was actually, something else that was really exciting was actually, it was really important to me, my mental health, my relationships, my physical well-being. I was as important as it was to getting back from William and Merriam. And what we've seen in the last few years, certainly as a result of COVID, is this great resignation. I think what a lot of people are seeing is they're starting to reevaluate what success means to them. And a lot of people are starting to reevaluate that and moving away from employers that aren't aligned with their important success measures. And a lot of that comes down to actually having that better work-life balance. And I was wondering whether you agree with that. Are you starting to, or have you started to reevaluate what's really important to you in the last 6 or 12 months? If you have, just either raise your hand or put a yes in the chat box. That'd be great to see whether that is, other people are starting to think about that. Because I'm seeing that with a lot of different employers. Yeah, so we've got a couple of people raising their hand. Jackie, Snare saying that, absolutely. Lucy, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Martin also raised his hand around that. Yeah, so we're all starting to reevaluate what's really important to us. So how can we start to do that? Well, the first thing it's important to do is getting a clarity around who or what are our time muggers. What are the things that are happening on a daily basis that are stopping you from leaving the office on time every night? Getting clarity around that after we start to think about our why can be really important. So again, love to share with you, or for you to share with me, what are some of your classic time muggers? Is it the old mobile phone and all the notifications that ping up every 5 minutes? Is it people interrupting you on Teams? Is it clients? Is it perhaps a lack of planning on your part? What are the kind of things that are getting in the way and meaning that you're struggling to get out of the office on time every night? Feel free to share those in the chat box as well. What are kind of things that we've got? Phone calls, meetings, sheer volume of work. Absolutely. That's I'm delivering a talk to an HR directors later on this week, and that's one of the things that come out with some researchers. The number one reason is the volume of work. Deadlines. What else? Volumes, phone calls, deadlines. Anyone else? What are your time muggers? The things that get in the way of you making that break from the office. Moving between different tasks. Yeah. That's switching. Switching is one of the major issues that causes a lack of focus. It causes cognitive fatigue as well, impacts on decision making, keeping on top of your inbox. Great. Okay, excellent. So a good range of examples there, the kind of time muggers. Unrealistic expectations, that's a big one. That really is a big one from bosses and clients as well, absolutely. So what I'm going to share with you are a number of different tools and techniques that you can start to apply that will help with all of those reasons and perhaps some of the other things. And if you've got any others, feel free to keep them coming. Anyone recognize this man? Anyone recognize him? Put a yes in the box if you do, or a no. For those of you that don't, he is Dwight D. Eisenhower. He was the 34th President of the United States. He was also a general in the Second World War, and actually was a 5-star general. He was responsible for the planning and the delivery of the invasion of North Africa. He was also then responsible for D-Day at Normandy in 1944 and 1945. And what he did in terms of those two incredibly powerful and stressful roles that he had to do, he actually created a time management tool that some of you may have come across before that allowed him to be really effective in those jobs. And I think we can learn a lot from him. I know that when I started to use this technique about 10 years ago, it made a massive difference to my ability to be able to get out of the office on time. And it's called the Eisenhower Decision Matrix. Has anyone come across this before? Put your hand up if you have, or pop a yes in the box if you have. So Alison Reid, so you come across this before? Great. Does anyone use this on a regular basis? Bethany has. Who uses it on a regular basis consistently? If you say yes in the box, if you use it on a consistent basis. For those of you who haven't come across it, let me walk you through it. So on the top left-hand corner, we've got the green box. Now these are tasks that are urgent and important. They're the things that we need to get done today. Then there are things that are important but not urgent. They're things that might need to get done tomorrow or the next day or some point this week. The really important thing is to try and spend as much time as we can in that blue box. That's when we become much more planned and organized. There are things that happen in the red box, and these are not important, but they're often urgent. The trouble is, they're often urgent for somebody else's agenda. They are the things that come in, can you just do this for me? Can you just get that? And they're fine for other people's agenda, but they have a big impact on yours. This is where the IEDs, if you like, of your effective working day. That's where they lie, and they are some of those time muggers, and they explode that, and they have a massive impact on your working day. So these are the ones we need to delegate or delete. And we need to be quite aware of what are these and what are the ones that we can delegate onto somebody else. And what are the things that actually we should just not even be doing. Getting really clarity around what are the kind of IDs, what are the time muggers here in this red box is the first step to being able to start to plan our time and spend more time in that blue or in that green box. And then they're thinking about the things that we shouldn't be doing at all. that are not urgent, are not important. And often it can be, random alerts on our phone, maybe it's social media, maybe it's getting sideswiped into something else. We're getting clear around what are the things that we shouldn't be doing. One of the most effective things that I do when I work with clients one-to-one around this is getting them to spend a good half an hour on going through and identifying what are the tasks that commonly fall into each of these boxes. And when they get clarity around that and they start to identify just how much time these things take up, certainly in the not important and urgent and the not important and not urgent, they start to realize just how many hours of their working week they can start to get back. And I know that for me, I'm probably 25% more productive on the weeks when I sit down on a Sunday night or a Monday morning and just quickly go through this in about 5 or 10 minutes. It allows me to get really focused and allows me to be aware of the things that are going to distract me this week. And once I get real clarity on that focus, that allows me to start to really become much more effective and manage my time better. So being really clear about what are the key things using this Eisenhower decision matrix on a regular basis. The next thing we can start to do, and the thing that made a big difference for me, was thinking about the old 80-20 rule. Now, I know that Vilfredo Pareto's principle has become a bit of a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. And that is it's highly successful. And for me, what I found when I married that, when I put Pareto on a date with Eisenhower, what it created was this amazing love child. And that was time to think, time to focus on what was really important. And most importantly, time to actually leave the office on time on a more consistent basis. So I can make that journey up the M6 and make sure I was back in time to pick William and Mary up before the end of that day. So getting real clarity on what are the most important bits of your day? What are the 20% of the things that are going to give you that 80% of the value? And getting real clarity around that, when you match that with that Eisenhower matrix, has a really big impact on our ability to deal with stuff. So although it's become a bit of a cliche, really focusing on that. There's a brilliant author by the name of James Clear, if anyone hasn't come across him. And he is the author of Atomic Habits, which has sold, I think, 4 or 5 million copies now worldwide. Has anyone come across that? If you have, just pop your name to yes in the chat box. And he talks about, it's fantastic, but really recommend it, Sonny. He's also got a great website where he's got short, digestible articles on how to do this, around with lots of other techniques. And what he talks about is getting clarity and writing down what are the top 10 things that give you most value in your work. What are the things that make the real difference? And then focusing, what are the top 2, and do more of those, and look at how you can start to cut out and eliminate all those non-essential things that has a big impact on that. So marrying those 2 techniques can be incredibly powerful. The next thing I needed to do for myself was realize that actually I was making excuses. So I needed to stop. I need to stop making excuses for why I couldn't be more organized, why I couldn't leave the office on time, and stop making excuses for why I wasn't willing to set boundaries, why I wasn't willing to manage the expectations of those other people that would allow me to leave the office on time. And what I realized was actually it came down to these two, excuse me, these 2 things. The first on the left is the fear of losing approval. And the thing on the right is our fear of not being in control. These are the 2 main causes of all psychological stress for human beings. And they come back from over our course of evolution, millions of years of evolution. We've had to work together in tribes to find food and shelter and warmth and security. If we got kicked out of our tribe all those thousands of years ago, the chances are our survival rates would go down. If we got separated from our tribe, our survival rate will go down. So we have become hardwired to need that heap of approval to work together in tribes. And if you think about your life today, you're part of our work tribe, you've got your home tribe, you might have some of the social connections tribes. You're part of all these different tribes. And if we feel the fear of being rejected from the tribe, that causes a huge amount of stress. I know that's something I'm seeing with William at the minute. Even though he's 15 now, he's got some issues with school kids. Maybe some of your children, if you have them, have found the same experiences. And the other one is around not feeling in control. And when as human beings, we face uncertainty, or we don't feel in control, that starts to drive our stress levels. And that gets a fundamental part for why actually we struggle to be able to set those boundaries and be able to then leave the office on time every night. So I'm going to share with you a couple of different techniques now that will allow you to get a better insight and awareness of those and hopefully start to be able to do something more positive around it. First thing is to think about and reflect on this question. How badly do you want approval? And that can be quite an uncomfortable question to think about and reflect on ourselves, but it really lies at the heart of actually what we can start to do about it. How badly do we want or do we need this approval? And who are we trying to seek approval from? And for what reasons? So spending time a little bit to think about that can be really important. The next thing we can start to do, so imagine this, is how we can start to reset some of these boundaries. So imagine this happens. It's 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, doesn't really matter what day, and your boss comes to you and said, hi, can you get this report, this particular bit of work done for him by 5 o'clock that day? You've actually, now you already thought you had till tomorrow to do this, but you suddenly brought forward this deadline. What do? I would imagine that most of us have been guilty of saying, okay, and then start to stress about how I'm going to get it done. I've got all this other work to do. And you don't push back, you don't say anything because there's that fear of losing approval or not managing their expectations. And that then gets in the way. So you either do one of a couple of things. Maybe you start to hurriedly task assign a bunch of work to somebody else and to get that other piece of work done. And that all you've done then is impact on them the same way that your boss has impacted on you or your client. Or maybe you say, yeah, okay, I'll get it done. And you just take it on board. You start to feel stressed. You start to feel annoyed. You start to feel frustrated. Maybe you cram everything in. And then actually the worst case scenario is you probably take it home at night. And then you're on your laptop at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, hurriedly trying to finish it off while managing everything else. And that's probably because you've fallen into a thinking trap. And one of the common thinking traps when it comes to this is that, actually, would you give your money away so freely? So here's a question to reflect on. If you give away your time so freely, would you be willing to give away your money so freely? And if I came to you and said, can you lend me 50 quid? What are the chances of you saying yes? I would imagine it's pretty slim. So what if we stopped giving our time away so freely? And one of the things that stops us from that is this black and white thinking. And that has to be, it's a yes or a no answer. It's a yes, I'll do it, or no, I won't. And again, what we've seen drives a lot of our reluctance to say no is that fear of losing approval and that fear now of not being in control. What most of us don't realize, though, is that actually we can negotiate. So how do we negotiate? What's the tools that we can do that? Well, the way to negotiate begins with 2 very simple, very small words. Yes, if. Here's what it sounds like. The boss comes to you and says, can you do this report for me, please, by 2 o'clock today? And you say, yes, if we can agree that actually that other piece of work I can delay till tomorrow or a later time. Or yes, if you can get all that information that I need to do that by 2 o'clock today or by 3 o'clock today. Or yes, if you can agree that Mary picks up this other pitch or this other presentation or this other brief or whatever it is. When we start to realize that actually our time is valuable and comes at a cost, and of course, as lawyers, you'll know that your time is money, then actually you can start to negotiate. And a lot of us forget that ability to negotiate. When we realize that we can negotiate, that puts us in a sense of control again. And that starts to lower down our stress levels, allowing us to think more clearly, and then hopefully be able to manage our time a lot better using some of the other techniques that we talked about to be able to do that. So that's another technique we can start to use. Yes, if, and then think about what you can negotiate with to help you manage that time better. How is this so far? Are you finding this interesting? Is it useful? If you get any thoughts on that, please feel to put them in the chat box. Any questions as well, and anything we've talked about so far, feel free to put them in the chat box or pop them in the Q&A. And I can either pick them up as we go along, or I can pick them up at the end. Any thoughts or questions? Useful so far, thank you. It would be incredibly hard to negotiate with a client if they're given working deadlines. Not just losing approval, but letting the team down. But again, a lot that comes down to that fear of losing approval. And actually what I've learned from my own experience, I can only share based on my own experience, is what actually that fear wasn't as bad as I thought it was. I didn't get fired. I managed to work at the time, and 9 times out of 10, people were a lot more flexible than I gave them credit for, and I had that more ability to negotiate on things than I initially thought was possible. Getting over that barrier was a major step in being able to do this. The next thing we can start to do is set your UFCs. Now, I don't mean Ultimate Fighting Championship. What I do mean is upfront contracts. And these are things that we set all the time. You probably do this at home with your spouse during the weekend, you know, maybe on a Thursday or Friday, you set the example of what's going to happen this weekend. So, you know, at 9 o'clock, we're going to take the kids to football. Then at 12 o'clock, so-and-so is coming around. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we've got this. Sunday morning, we're doing this. Sunday afternoon, we're doing that. What we're doing is setting our upfront contracts for what we're going to do and when. And that was a big thing I started to do with my team, was I started to put on my out of office for every email that would give them an example of what was going to happen and by when. And another, you know, I run a podcast now, and my podcast producer does this. Every time you send her an email, you get an instant response back that says that she checks her emails between 8 in the morning and 9 o'clock, and then she checks them again after 3 o'clock. And that clients will get a response within 24 hours, and everyone else will spend 48 hours. And that sets that expectation right from the start that I will, you know, even as a client, I know if I've emailed her at 9:10, I won't expect to hear back from her until at least 3 o'clock in the afternoon, possibly not until the next morning. Or if I've emailed her at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the chances are I won't get a response back till 8 o'clock the next morning. And that's absolutely fine. What she's doing is setting those expectations up front about when she's going to reply and by when and for perhaps what method. So thinking about how can we set our upfront contracts with our colleagues and with our family members and other people. And I do this at home. If I'm writing a book and I'm in halfway through my fourth book, my kids know that between 8 o'clock in the morning and 10 o'clock in the morning, don't bother me. You know, either one of them has to be bleeding to death or the house has to be on fire. And they know now not to bother me because I'm absolutely focused on getting that piece of work done. I have no email up, I have no interruptions. I'm just absolutely focused on getting that done. And it's amazing, actually it takes a little bit of time, but I started to do this with my team 10 years ago as well, set the expectations about when actually was the time that they could come and speak to me and manage that time. And that allowed me to be a lot more productive. And that led on to this next technique, which is called time blocking. And that's what I was able to do with managing my diary, is putting in time when I was going to do certain things and that'll be unavailable. And that allowed me to focus on getting my work done. If we don't do that, then we become the mercy of everybody else impacting on our time with their agenda. And your agenda becomes everybody else's agenda. So thinking about how actually we can start to set our time and block our time out to be able to do that, so we don't get interruptions from teams or other things, and we're able to do that kind of focused work, is a really key part to be able to working on a regular basis and getting that time done so we can leave the office on time every night. So to summarize, there are 4 or 5 key things that we can start to do. I've showed you a number of different techniques now. Each one of these on their own can help. When you start to put them together as part of a package, they make a massive difference. And that's what really allowed me to make sure, as a head of communications, that I, traveling 30 miles away from home, I was able to go from consistently working late and running late, because at the time my then wife was able to pick up the children because she worked much closer, to actually having to do this 5 times out of 5 and not having to work at 8, 9 o'clock at night, like when I get home. And it was firstly getting clear around what's my reason why and how the importance of that. Then starting to really prioritize my work and looking at that matrix and that Pareto thing together and starting to identify that. Then negotiating a lot more with people around, yes, if I'm managing those expectations and setting those upfront contracts with people about what I was prepared to do and when and all those kind of things. That started to have a massive impact. So those are really what I wanted to share with you today on the things that enable me to be able to leave that office on time on a regular basis. Anyone got any questions? Feel free to raise your hand or put some questions in the chat box and I'll happily answer those. Any questions so far? Anything in the Q&A? Got no questions? How do you cope when tasks overrun and allotted time? That's a great question. I think then it becomes around managing your other work. So again, setting up front contracts with people around, if this is overrun, identifying what are the key priorities and what can you do about that? Can you bring somebody else in? Can you renegotiate a time deadline? What can you start to do around that? In terms of advice to junior lawyers, maybe they don't have the power and confidence to negotiate, I would say try it. Nobody wants you to fail. Nobody wants you to start to burn out. It's not in your partner's interest to feel stressed or burn out because you're not going to get the work done. 9 times out of 10, it's just the fear of doing that. If you can get past that and start to negotiate with people about what's possible, I've never experienced or very rarely experienced somebody that I couldn't negotiate with about managing expectations. So yeah, just actually starting to have that conversation and understand that actually it's in everybody's interest that you're able to deliver your work on time. So finding out what are the key things that are going to be able to do that. There's usually, or 9 times out of 10, there's a lot more that can be done to be able to manage that than perhaps you give yourself credit for. Yeah, so if we go back to the pie charts around that, the 80-20, where's it gone? There. So what with this is, it's actually 20% of the things that we do. So of all our effort, 80% of the things that we do don't give us the most value. It's the 20% of the things that we focus on that actually give us 80% of the value. 80% of the effort actually only corresponds to about 20% of the output. So the key is, how can we focus on that 20%? And this is a fascinating law by Vivaldo Pareto. He started to look at it from economics, but actually this law of 80-20 applies pretty much in lots of different areas of life and nature in terms of where the 20% delivers the 80% of the value. So it's understanding what's the 20% of what you're doing gives you the 80% of the value that you need to do. Yeah, we're going to email the slides out to you as a helpful memoir as well. Any other questions? We've got one in the Q&A. Not really a question, but I've been trying to leave the office every day with half an hour at the end of the set working days and New Year's resolution. What I found is that the world doesn't fall apart if I leave on time. Absolutely, and leave something for the next day. It probably helps that I'm a morning person, so I focus better in the morning in any event. I think there's a couple of really good points you mentioned there. One is, I said, the world doesn't fall apart. A lot of the time we have this false idea in our heads that actually the world will fall apart or something really bad is going to happen. And honestly, it doesn't, because God forbid, if you fell down ill tomorrow, the world will still keep turning. It would all get picked up. And the other thing is focusing on when are you most at your effective. So if you're a morning person like me and perhaps this person, I know I'm much more effective in the morning. So if I can get in and get distraction time free, I can get a big chunk of what I need to really get done by about 10:30, 11:30 o'clock in the morning. And then I can afford to be a little bit slacker during the rest of the day. So focusing on that. If you're an afternoon person or an evening person, what can you schedule in the morning? It's not important, but how can you schedule your time to give you the most time in the afternoon if you're an afternoon person? So thinking about whether you're that person as well can be really effective. Any other questions or thoughts? Any challenges to what I've said? Feel free to challenge.
I was just going to ask a question, Anthony. Just, do you have any tips for staying focused? So even if you've blocked out a period of time to do something, but you know that something's cropped up that's urgent that you should probably deal with, how do you stay focused and not take on the distraction of an email popping up or something that you feel that you should, that's going to take you away from what you've set time aside to do?
3 things. One is I turn off notifications on my phone, and the second thing, if it's really important, I'll just turn off my email for 5 minutes. I'll just shut down Outlook, because if it's that urgent, really is urgent, then someone can call me. But actually, if you've got emails pinging in, every time you see that little number going up in the bottom of your Outlook pings in with a message, it's a distraction. It says to your brain something's going on. And if every time you're A lot of people think multitasking, they can multitask, what they can't. It's switch tasking. So every time you're asking your brain to switch task from something else, even a little distraction as to an email notification comes up, it actually takes you several times longer to refocus back on the task. So if I know I've got to really work, I'll shut down my email, I'll shut down my notifications on my phone, and I'll just be dedicated to that task, because it'll take me 3 times less time to do it than it will if I'm trying to think about emails coming in. That answer your question, Kate?
Yeah, it does. It's just something that I'm really bad at.
Yes. Yeah, it just takes a bit of practice, but I know that that's and it did for me, because you think, oh, I can just reply to that, but if you're not careful, then you just reply. It takes 2 minutes, but actually then something else comes back, and before you know it, you're 15, 20 minutes, half an hour off your original task, and you've gone down a rabbit warren, or you've gone down a rabbit hole rather. So it's about being really clear that if I focus for however long on this task, then that's done and off my desk. And that then comes back to, what are the really things that are most important, the 80-20 rule and the Eisenhower matrix. If I know what's really important and I get that done, I'm going to be less stressed. Then I can respond to some of those, which is why I find setting the out of office quite helpful, because although it took a bit of time to get my team up to speed on actually, don't bother me between these hours, what I found was they would either go away and figure it out for themselves, or they would then come back and ask me at a later date, a later time, but it wasn't that important. And actually what I found was they go away and figure it out for themselves or go somewhere else. So I didn't really need to be distracted. A lot of the time I found as a manager, when I reflected, I was being inefficient because I like to be needed, I like to be wanted, I like to be able to give advice, but that was impacting on my ability to get my job done. So reflecting on that, and I took a cue from some of the more senior people above me, the chief executive, how well they protect their time. Well, if he wants to be that effective, why shouldn't I be that effective with mine? Why shouldn't I be that effective with my time? Would my chief executive want me to be, running around at a million miles an hour and not actually being very effective? No, they wouldn't. So take a cue from senior partners or whoever it is and how well they protect their time. And I'd imagine they protect it very well. So I'm sure they'd want us to do the same.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? So someone's put, I use an auto response to my emails to manage everyone's expectations. It acknowledges the emails. Absolutely, that's great. Thank you for sharing that, Alison. So that very much mirrors. Yeah, someone else has put the work offline option is useful. Thank you, Sunay. So they're not rocket science, any of these tips. Some of them can be a bit difficult in our mindset to start to implement because we fear that, or what will people think? What will people, how will I lose approval or whatever? But actually, if we set those very quickly, people will start to accept those and manage their time around that as well. Any other questions from anybody else? I would say it can feel that way, Elizabeth, absolutely, and that comes from a lack of confidence. But again, if you start to think about, would your senior partners start to, ask them if you're not clear around what the priorities are. What I've seen with all my years of working with middle managers, especially now in the last 10 years as a coach and a consultant, is it's the fear of not knowing, or rather it's the lack of clarity that causes a lot of stress. Everybody recognizes you can only do one thing at once. So if you've got ask your senior partner, I've got these 3 things here. What's the most important thing for me to do right now? Rather than assuming they've got to do everything. You can't physically do 3 things at once. So what is the most important thing that for you to get done to now or this day? Any lack of clarity, that lack of clarity is what causes stress. So they would rather have somebody who's got the confidence to come back and go, what's the priority here? Is it this or is it this? And focus on delivering that, than someone who doesn't, gets burnt out, is massively inefficient, and actually takes 3 times longer to do something. Any tips to stop procrastinating and go with the thing you don't want to do instead of, Procrastination is another form of fear, basically. That's why you're doing it. And it's simple. I would say just the way I do it, if I know I'm procrastinating, is I say, what's the smallest single thing I can do to start whatever I'm procrastinating on? So recently I had a bit of a health issue with my eye, and I started to notice that, but I was having gone, what could it be? And I was being a bit of a bloke and sort of putting it off. And then I realized, what's the one thing I can do? I can just look up the optician's number and remind myself. And then I actually once said, look that up. And I thought, well, I might as well give them a call, actually. So actually, it's what's the one small thing that you can do? And often what supports procrastination is what we call ants. And these are our automatic negative thoughts that we often have around something. So being aware of, right now, what are your ants about this particular thing? What are your automatic negative thoughts about it? And then once you've made a quick note of what those are, what are your pets? Pets are positive enabling thoughts. So what might be the positive benefit of starting this thing that you're procrastinating on? So what are your ants and what are your pets? Ants are those automatic negative thoughts, pets are those positive enabling thoughts. It's easier if one has a good manager, but much more difficult with those who are themselves struggling. They're reluctant to take responsibility for making decisions about priorities. Even, yeah, it can be a real challenge with that. It can be a real challenge with that. For that, I just go on my gut instinct. What do I think are the things that are most important, and work on those? If my manager hasn't given me clarity in the past, then I'll tell them, okay, that's fine. Just so you know, I'm going to go and work on this then. And I've made a decision that puts me back in control. And if they really feel strongly about it, that actually it should be something else, they're more likely to speak up. But if they're being a bit vague and wishy-washy, don't you go away and be vague and wishy-washy back and just go, okay, I go, right, I'm going to go and do this then. Is that okay? And you've told them, you set your upfront contract that that's what you're going to focus on. If they don't like that, they've got the opportunity to speak up. So taking the responsibility yourself to say, this is what I'm going to work on. Any other thoughts or questions from anybody? I think they've dried up a bit, Kate. I'm not sure if everyone's
Yeah, I can't see any more coming in either. Just give it a couple of seconds in case anyone's got any last minute thoughts, but I think there's definitely been something there for all of us to take away and things to work on. Definitely be putting some time blocks out in my diary for the coming week to see if that helps me. But thank you so much, Anthony, for your time today in coming to speak with us. It's been really helpful, and loads of top tips for us all to try and implement. Just for everybody that's attended, a reminder that the session has been recorded, and Helen will be in touch with a link to that in the next few days so you can look back, and also I believe the slides that Anthony's kindly prepared will be circulated as well as a bit of an aid memoir, if that would be useful. If you have any feedback on the session or the wider programme, or anything that you think supporting Surrey could cover in the coming months, then please do let us know. And if you contact Helen OP at Surrey Law Society, then she will look at that. And yeah, all that remains to me to say is thank you, Anthony, and thank you everybody for coming along.
My pleasure. If anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I write a lot of article posts all around, you know, mindset management, how we can manage these kind of things as well. So feel free to look me up on LinkedIn and connect.